There we go.
That's usually ominous of things to come. Anyway, how's everybody doing on this Thursday? I hope you all are doing well. It's been quite a year, quite a week, a lot going on right now, but yet we are here, and you can count on usually both of us, but if not both of us, at least one of us are going to be here for you guys on Thursdays. And also, we hope that you are enjoying the playbacks that we have been posting of the wonderful time we've had together since like early to mid March of this year. The family that has grown and accumulated and just continues to build and get stronger, and all kind of wonderful things happening in this literacy gang, this virtual village family. We are happy to be here, and I am happy to be here with my co-host, Mr. Rodney Jordan. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing just fine. Like I tell you, it's always good to come up here and be with you in the village, and focus on some good, important literacy and conversations. It's seems like every Thursday that we come up here, I don't know if it's something that happens on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, but somehow it seems like for the last several weeks, when we're up here on a Thursday, the day or a couple of days before, there's something else going on in the country or in the world that just reinforces the importance of this work, the importance of being engaged, and the importance of providing leadership to this country and to the world, because Lord knows it needs it.
Geez, like, yeah. Yeah, it's so much. And when I scheduled the show today, I put the title "A Safe, Consistent Space" because I
I saw
feel,
that. I was going to ask you about that.
yeah, I mean, of course, and it's all about the literacy, and literacy ties into our lives in so many ways, because I feel like when we're literate and we enjoy reading, we seek out information on our own. And I think, again, I'm always talking about history as a weapon, literacy as a weapon, and we are able to utilize what we learn, for the challenges that lie if currently in front of us and ahead. But a safe space, because we've been here, we've been showing up every Thursday. That's the feedback that I feel that's been very consistent, as far as people enjoying the stories, people enjoying the people who come on and read the stories, but also the fact that people know that consistently we're going to be here. And so during this time, I believe it was one of our influencers, Jameer, who said it's a nice reprieve
Mhm.
from everything that is going on, which does not mean that we're shying away, not doing the work, or educating, getting not doing whatever we do in our own regards, but nonetheless, it's where the conversations can flourish. It's a little break, whether we decide to read something that deals with what we're talking about, or read something that kind of takes us away for a minute to a magical place for our young people and our families. But it's a safe, consistent space. So here, the conversation, the love, the venting, and of course the literacy are always going to be here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know what I think of, and what I was just thinking of as you were speaking. I think part of the distinguishing lens that this platform offers is the culturally affirming piece. So there's a lot of stuff you can see out there in the news. There are a lot of programs you can watch. There are a lot of videos and TikToks and all kinds of things that are out there. But being rooted in being culturally affirming and all that encompasses, even as you say, we may, and is representative of the diversity of the community, even as we are still focused on being culturally affirming in our agreements, in our disagreements, in our different lenses. But I think that culturally affirming piece is it just is more and more important every day, and it's the events of the world and the events of the country, to me, take it from this uh, book definition, some type of academic discussion, to the real importance of what being culturally affirming is all about, and why it's so critically important that we are sharing that culturally affirming, uplifting literature with our young people from the earliest time that they can hear somebody read to them, to the point where they can read for themselves and all throughout their lives from that point forward.
Definitely. I agree 1000%. And as you said in our agreements and disagreements, I enjoy disagreeing with you.
You don't disagree with me.
No, I know, because I feel like we don't ever really fully disagree, but I think great conversations have ensued as a result of my path A and your path B, both of us headed to destination C. So it's been a great ride here disagreeing with you.
If we were a video Instagram and the conversation went away versus living on forever, we might have even more interesting in-depth discussions.
Yes. So before we move on to what you guys came for tonight to hear us read these stories, we're going to make sure that you guys don't forget about this brilliance here.
Look, mommy, community in action. But oh my, let us sound of that. Look, daddy, there's a book for me too. But oh my, let us sound of that. Creative, affirming, and culture for me too. Look, granny, and let us sound of that. Look, granny, and let us sound of that. Look, granny, and let us sound of that. Learning and exploring my history, you see. Look, mommy, and let us sound of that. We confident, we practice and developing fluency. Look, daddy, and let us sound of that. Families, they bond and they representing me. Look, granny, and let us sound of that. Look, auntie, and let us sound of that. Nice, I see, let us sound of that. I'm so reliable, culturally relevant. Sit back and listen to the wisdom while we represent. So reliable, culturally relevant. Readers to leaders, they hold it down where they have to sit. Who reliable, culturally relevant. Sit back and listen to the wisdom while you represent. So reliable, culturally relevant. Readers to leaders, they hold it down, yeah, they have to sit. Look, mommy, community in action. Well, oh my, let us sound of that. Look, daddy, there's a book for me too. Well, oh my, let us sound of that. Creative, affirming, culture for me too. Look, granny, let us sound of that.
Nice, I see a love the sound of it. Forever loving the sound of that. And I tell you guys all the time, it is my ringtone. So I love the sound of it every day. And I like to let other people love the sound of it as well. I always let it ring just a little longer so people can hear it if I'm out in public. So do you have any books for us tonight?
Well, a few weeks ago, I was reading from this book, 50 Black Women Who Changed America. So I've been forgetting it or missing it. So I do have a chapter, maybe two, depending upon how much we shared tonight. But I definitely like to read some more from this book by Amy Alexander, 50 Black Women Who Changed America.
That sounds great. We've been enjoying those selections. And again, I'm always loving how you represent for Black women and acknowledge the fact that sometimes in the movement, a lot of times the sisters were not given the acknowledgement and credit that they deserve. Not everybody is aware of all the things that were done, but Jordan is always here to show up and let everybody know. I have a few selections here. I like to give people options. So I do believe that variety is the spice of life. So I
come on now.
With you guys being able to, choose between 1, 2, or 3 selections. So when it's my time, I'll do that. And another thing I wanted to mention, I'm super excited about this weekend. One of our youth, one of our precious virtual village young people, she has something special going on. So that's our Shania. If you guys tune in regularly, you know that normally she is the first commenter up here. And if you've noticed that her comments haven't been here, because we've definitely noticed it and missed it, it's because she is in the midst of a very big production. She actually has a lead role in the Junie B. Jones play with the Hurrah Players. And I believe they started this Thursday. So they have been rehearsing for a while. And we told you guys about it. So I hope you got your tickets, because I was warned that it would sell out fast. So I got my tickets, and I'll be there this Saturday evening. So I cannot wait to see baby girl do her thing. She has come on here and, she reads in such a stately manner. She's doing so well in all her endeavors, and she and her grandmother are just this dynamic team. And so, I'm just really looking forward. She's read monologues up here, and I always say when Shania's here, I must get my back straight and sit up with great posture. And so her presence is phenomenal. It's outstanding. So I look forward to being able to see her there doing her thing. I'm super, super excited about that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, you guys, that our little Shania is just, she's done performances before, but I think this is one of her bigger roles. So I'm glad to be able to be there. I'm looking forward to that. And we have Bridget here, and she says, Carter says, there goes us. Yes, in the intro. Yes, I love that he says that, and that he's able to see himself in this, because both he and you are a part of this. And Bridget says, love her, love our Shania. Definitely. We are super proud of her. And as she moves forward in all of her endeavors, we definitely want to support her. I think Rodney and I are not going to make it on the same night, but nonetheless, it's going to be, we'll come back and tell you guys all about it.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's see. We'll switch it up a little bit and let you go first.
Will we go first? Okay. All right.
So I'll step back and snack on some of my pecans while I listen.
All right, you do that.
You read.
Okay. Right. So as I said, I'm going to be sharing from the book 50 Black Women Who Changed America by Amy Alexander. And the chapter I want to start with is on Fannie Lou Hamer. And it just seems to me, with a lot going on right now with political conventions and voting and civil rights and protest and standing up and making a difference and being sick and tired, it just seemed to me that maybe I will start off tonight with a selection about the great, wonderful, pioneering lady extraordinaire, Fannie Lou Hamer, who lived from 1917 to 1977. And it says, from sharecropper to shining light. The life of Fannie Lou Townsend Hamer encompasses a crucial part of 20th century American history. Now, some 20 years after her death, Fannie Lou Hamer is finally receiving long overdue recognition for her important role in the fight for civil rights in the Deep South of the 1950s and 60s. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, Fannie Lou told an interviewer during the heated days of the civil rights movement. That kind of straightforward expression made Fannie Lou a compelling figure in the tumultuous battle to end racial discrimination in the United States. In working to end legal segregation in the Jim Crow South for more than a decade, Fannie Lou was beaten, shot at, and jailed. She saw friends murdered and beaten as they fought for their right to live as equals to whites in America. She joined a political movement at a time when doing so meant a death sentence for blacks in Mississippi. And she helped establish a legacy of activism that has carried the most southern states into the modern era. Her favorite song, which she sang at almost every community gathering she attended, was the gospel standard, This Little Light of Mine. It became Fannie Lou's signature song, a credo that expressed her special inner fire. She was a little light. She was actually a very big light, and she shone that light on a lot of dark places in the American soul, said Kay Mills, author of Fannie Lou's 1993 biography. Born in Montgomery County, Mississippi on October 6, 1917, Fannie Lou was the youngest of 20 children born to Lou Ella and Jim Townsend. At a time when many residents of the Deep South, both black and white, lived well below the poverty line, Fannie Lou's family was among the poorest of the poor. After the tragic years of slavery, the social institutions of Mississippi rendered blacks second-class citizens. A new feudal arrangement descended on the former slaves. Under the arrangement commonly known as sharecropping, blacks worked land owned by whites. lived in ramshackle housing owned by whites, and were required to buy their food, supplies, seed, fertilizer, and equipment in stores run by whites. In this way, thousands of rural Southern blacks remained in debt to white landowners for decades after the official end of slavery in America. Life was brutal, hard, and thankless. Only the sanctuaries of family and church provided emotional stability for black Southerners trapped in this system. In Montgomery County and nearby Sunflower County, where Fannie Lou's great-grandparents had been slaves, blacks lived lives without pity, lives that too often ended while they were still young. Liberation from the endlessly backbreaking work, from unsafe working conditions, from the unequal distribution of profits was a distant dream for a population that had endured generations of hardships and dashed hopes. Few saw reason to believe that their situation would ever improve, in part because all white political leadership was not interested in seeing that happen. The chances that African Americans might elect new political leadership were slim to none, since blacks were intimidated out of exercising their constitutional right to vote by racist whites. In 1923, at the age of 6, Fannie Lou went to work in the cotton fields near her family's home in Montgomery County. Like her relatives before her, Fannie Lou learned that her lot in life would be years of toil, little or no education, and constant fear of the whites who controlled the local political and economic landscape. Fannie Lou managed to attend the rundown local colored public school until the age of 12, when she dropped out to help her family work the land full time. A few years later, she married another local sharecropper, Perry Pap Hamer, and they set out to start a family. Fannie Lou became pregnant twice, but suffered 2 miscarriages. She and Pap eventually adopted 2 neighborhood girls from their rural village, and Fannie Lou remained confident that someday she would be able to conceive. Years later, during the early 60s, Fannie Lou went to a local doctor for a minor ailment and later learned that she had been given what was known as a, quote, Mississippi appendectomy. While she was under sedation, the doctor had removed her uterus. This practice of involuntarily sterilizing low-income Black women was tragically common during the period in the Deep South. In later years, Fannie Lou spoke out strongly on the controversial subject of women's reproductive rights. She became one of the first poor Black women in America to take a public stand against abortion and advocate increased funding for women's health care. But before she embarked on that path, Fannie Lou made her mark as a ferocious fighter in the battle to end racial discrimination in Mississippi. On a steamy August day in 1962, Fannie Lou decided she was fed up with sharecropping. Civil rights activists were pressing for voting rights in neighboring Alabama and in Georgia. And earlier that summer, a group of college students from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, had come to Sunflower County, where the Hamer family lived. After listening to the young, enthusiastic student activists, Fannie Lou convinced a few neighbors in her town that they should begin to stand up for themselves. So on that August day, she joined 17 stalwart friends, and they left their tiny Ruleville town and headed by bus for the Montgomery County seat in Indianola. Fannie Lou wanted to exercise her constitutional right to vote, even though she knew that for decades, Blacks had been intimidated by whites if they so much as mentioned a desire to take part in the democratic process. Once the group arrived in Indianola, they were greeted coldly by the voter registration staff. Undeterred, Fannie Lou and other Ruleville travelers demanded that they be registered to vote. At the time, the predominantly white county workers required a literacy test of those who sought to become voters, filled with arcane legal language and bizarre constitutional references. Few undereducated Blacks could hope to pass the test. Frustrated, the group returned to Ruleville. Fannie Lou then learned that the white landowner who employed her family had kicked them out of their home while she was away. White landowners often used this cruel tactic to punish sharecroppers who displayed, quote, uppity behavior. Enraged by the landowner's meanness, Fannie Lou determined to keep trying to register to vote. On 3 separate tries, Fannie Lou was rebuffed. She was turned away on 2 occasions, and on another was shot at by an angry white racist. During the next year, Fannie Lou found support among the growing community of civil rights activists who began streaming into the rural South. By the summer of 1963, she was traveling around the South, taking part in citizen education workshops. It was on one of these trips that Fannie Lou encountered a situation that would test her personal resolve and her faith in the decency of man. In Winona, Mississippi, Fannie Lou and 6 other female grassroots organizers were stopped by sheriff's deputies at a bus station. They were arrested for disturbing the peace and taken to a local jail. Fannie Lou later described what happened. Then 3 white men came into my room. One was a state highway policeman. He had the marking on his sleeve, and they said they were going to make me wish I was dead. They made me lay down on my face, and they ordered 2 Negro prisoners to beat me with a blackjack. That was unbearable. The first prisoner beat me until he was exhausted. Then the second Negro began to beat me. I had polio when I was about 6 years old, and I have a limp. So I held my hands down and beneath me, trying to protect my weak side. I began to work my feet. My dress pulled up, and I tried to smooth it down. One of the policemen walked over and raised my dress as high as he could. They beat me until my body was hard, till I couldn't bend my fingers or get up when they told me to. That's how I got this blood clot in my eye. The sight's nearly gone, and my kidney was injured from the blows they gave me. Even in a desperately bad time, when physical abuse was common, the beating of Fannie Lou outraged civil rights workers. She had been left alone in the jail cell for hours after the beating, bleeding and badly in need of medical treatment. She was released a few days later after a young civil rights worker named Andrew Young arrived with bail money. He sent her to Atlanta to meet with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he referred her to the United States Justice Department. Robert Kennedy, then the U.S. Attorney General, was so upset by the beating of the women that he personally intervened and filed criminal charges against the law enforcement officers in Winona who had engineered the violence. When the case came to trial in Mississippi some months later, an all-white, all-male jury acquitted the lawmen of all charges. Once she recovered from her injuries, Fannie Lou threw herself into the civil rights movement, volunteering for work with both SNCC and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. During the next 2 years, she would find herself in high-powered company as middle-class white and black activists from New York, Chicago, and Baltimore continued organizing blacks in the Deep South. Early in 1964, a presidential election year, a coalition of civil rights groups formed the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party after failing to gain participation in the regular Democratic Party. This grassroots group chose a delegation consisting of poor residents from the state to seek recognition from the National Party. At that time, white Democrats were arguing for a slow approach to ending segregation in the Deep South. But for Fannie Lou and other members of the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Progress, slow progress was almost as bad as no progress. They sought to challenge the right of the all-white official Mississippi Democratic delegation on the grounds that it did not fairly represent the entire population of the state. Headed by Fannie Lou, the delegation went to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City in August and demanded recognition as the official delegation of the Mississippi Democratic Party. In the fight over credentials, Fannie Lou was chosen to represent the group. She testified before Democratic Party leaders. Her testimony, including the vivid description of being beaten and shot at by whites, riveted the convention. But the effect was almost undone by President Lyndon B. Johnson. He deliberately called a press conference that preempted the televising of Fannie Lou's testimony. But network television executives, aware of the dramatic input of Fannie Lou's heart-wrenching story, aired her testimony in its entirety later that evening, so allowing all of America to hear firsthand the horrors of the conflict over civil rights in the Deep South. A year later, securely reelected, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which ensured that all Blacks of eligible age would be permitted to vote. Once again, Fannie Lou had angered the local white leadership in Mississippi, but gained support from sympathetic whites and African Americans living outside of the South. Fannie Lou continued working to improve the conditions of her Mississippi community. Soon, high-profile activists like Harry Belafonte and Andrew Young were looking to her as a guiding force in the tiny villages of Mississippi. She traveled to Africa with a delegation that included Belafonte and met with several presidents and dignitaries there. During the late 60s and 70s, Fannie Lou continued to work on a multitude of important issues, including educational opportunity, agricultural improvements for Blacks, and low-cost housing. Where many of her neighbors gave up on civil rights organizing after the heady days of the mid-60s had passed and the Northern workers had left the region, Fannie Lou remained a dedicated activist. Often at local meetings, she would lead the gathering and singing, "This Little Light of Mine." Those who knew her believed she was blessed with an especially powerful inner strength. In the mythology of the region, where historic ties to African and Caribbean cultures remain, some even said that Fannie Lou had been granted a mystical, charismatic power by the ancient gods. She never spoke of such matters, but many who saw her rouse a gathering to action believed that Fannie Lou at least marched to a powerful drummer. In 1971, Fannie Lou ran for the Mississippi Senate and was defeated by a white politician. But she triumphed in bringing much-needed state and federal dollars into a host of social programs for rural Blacks in her hometown. By the mid-1970s, recovering from breast cancer and suffering from kidney problems caused by that Winona beating, Fannie Lou was in poor health. She died in 1977 in the small town where she had lived most of her life. Many years later, when Fannie Lou's biographer Kay Mills visited Sunflower County, she met a man named Willie Simons, the first Black man to be elected to the Mississippi State Senate from that district. Standing up proudly, he told Mills, "I am living Fannie Lou Hamer's dream." So that is Fannie Lou Hamer, died at the young age of 60, from sharecropper to shining light, one of the 50 Black women who changed America. Fannie Lou Hamer.
Excellent. That was a great excerpt and very important, a very important figure in the history of our culture and of the United States and the world. The impact of Sister Fannie Lou Hamer is something that needs to be known by everybody. And, just to hit on a few things that you talked about. One, the how brave and courageous everyone was at that time. It requires bravery. It requires people to be bravery and courageousness all the time, even today. But nonetheless, back then, during that time, when you talked about the beating that she sustained, and I mean that, I feel like sometimes we listen to these accounts of history and we just kind of, hear it.
Gloss it over. Yeah.
I'm hearing that, but we don't stop to actually take it in, to really think about what that, and that, she was someone's aunt, someone's wife, someone's sister, someone's daughter, and that this type of thing actually happened and was happening. And all the times that has happened and it hasn't been documented, when we start talking about historic things that occurred, and nonetheless, she persevered. And people during that time persevered. When we tell the story about that and how she was involuntarily given a hysterectomy and how traumatic that had to be, and the whole concept of medical apartheid. Yeah. And the reason why, unfortunately, a lot of Black people do not trust going to doctors, hospitals, when people get on us a lot of times about not doing that. There are, and I'm not advocating not doing it, but I'm saying there are reasons behind the lack of trust there, because I have it myself. It does not mean that I don't get my regular checkups and everything, but I have a major side eye when it comes to things. And so this is important for us to understand that when we look at these situations that are happening now, how long these things have been occurring and to what extent, and to every aspect of life, racism permeates through all of it. I don't know that we could think of one aspect of our lives where we're like, oh, well, there was no racism there.
No, it's woven in the fabric. It's woven in the fabric.
Woven into the fabric. Yes.
Well, I was watching I was planning to watch the NBA game last night. Mm-hmm. And of course, when I turned to it, that was when they were discussing the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks had decided to protest, boycott, strike, whatever word you want to use, in response to the horrific the horrific shooting that took place. Say that again.
Maiming.
Yeah. The horrific shooting of being shot 7 times in the back for whatever reason at a police stop. And so I was moved and I was proud that the young men made that decision. I was watching Chris Webber and some of the remarks and speeches that he gave. But what I also found was interesting. So while I had great admiration for the young men in the NBA, but then they shifted to the scene of the young ladies in the WNBA, who also decided they were going to strike that night. And they had on the front of their shirts, Jacob's name. And on the back of their shirts, they had 7 holes representing the 7 shots in the back. So, I laud and I appreciate and I value what the stance that the men took. But, the men in the NBA, some of them make tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. The ladies in the WNBA, they might make $150,000 in terms of their salary. And so as I was watching all of it and proud of all of it, and hearing LeBron James and others just saying that they were sick of it, that's what made me, one of the reasons I thought of Fannie Lou Hamer in terms of sick and tired of being sick and tired. But then I also thought of that, I don't know if juxtaposition is the right word, but what the men were doing and also what the ladies were doing, and the additional risk economically.
Yes.
The ladies in the WNBA were taking on even beyond what what the men were taking on, just in terms of the disparity in the amount of money that they make. And there's reasons for that. But I just think we have to, in our age, just make sure that we are inclusive. If we're demanding that others be inclusive and culturally affirming and uplifting, that we can recognize all of that contribution, as you mentioned earlier. And the last thing I'll just say on this is that, even as you were just saying, a lot of the commentators were talking about how they just could never think of any time before where athletes had taken a stance like that. And I think that might be true in some respects, although we know what Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jim Brown and others did back in the 60s. But even in this great protest, none of that compared to what Fannie Lou went through and the beating that she took and the threats that she endured and the intimidation that her family went through. And so as you and I talk about often, I think we always have to remember that strength so that we are passing that on to each generation, so we don't have this impression that somehow we're starting from scratch and that we're in this alone and that we don't have the shoulders of others to stand upon. So I'll stop there, but I think everybody needs to take the time to read that story and to go online and look at that speech that Sister Hamer gave at that convention, the Democratic Convention, back in Atlantic City in the 1960s. So
it's right on YouTube, and you can also find a lot of her giving accounts of her stories, her life, things that she went through. You can find it on YouTube coming direct from her. And it's very powerful, very soul stirring. And just going back to that particular beating in that prison, thinking about, being a woman, when you said how harshly they beat her and the fact that she mentioned her dress came up, and, just the dehumanization, the demoralization that continues to happen, but that occurred. Then again, you're thinking about someone like that should not happen to anybody. But there's typically, you look at that and you're thinking of your aunt. Mm-hmm. You're thinking of your mother, and you're thinking, and just the fact that it happened to her and the others. And then think about the people who just living during that time, knowing that was occurring during that time, and the level of stress, the level of trauma that people are still walking around with as a result of having lived during that time, and the re-traumatization that they may have put on to their offspring, but also the re-traumatization that they get by reliving not the exact same thing, but similar things over and over again. So it's always important, as you said, we can't be ostriches. We cannot have our heads buried in the sand, and we cannot be, as I believe you were alluding to, afraid to make sure that the history, the story is being told accurately, that we are telling it, that we are not allowing other people to dance around it, to pretend that it didn't happen, or to tell it in a clean, sanitized way. Because, I'm going through one of the books that I was going to read, and I'm like, I'm probably not going to read that because it's a little too sanitized for me. I need to write one of these things so I can talk about domestic terrorism.
Yeah, well, it's funny. There's I know one day I'd come across the African proverb or the saying that the axe often forgets, but the tree always remembers. So, sometimes, the tree does remember. The axe goes on to chop down the next tree. The tree always remembers.
Wow.
So anyway,
powerful. That's use that one. Where'd that come from?
I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, and then there's a lot to take away from that Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as well. We
a lot of messages in there: independent organizing, dealing with police brutality, government sanctioned terrorism, determine that you're not going to be second class, thinking that you're living in freedom, but in essence you are in a long-term debt economic situation. There are a lot of things in that story that are just relevant right now.
And there was so much. I listened to her probably last month or the month before. I was doing a little Fannie Lou Hamer run, and when she left the where her family, I believe they were sharecropping, she and her husband. When she left, that was a big deal. Like that alone, I think her family got kicked off as a result.
That's what they said after she went down to try to register to vote, and she came back, and that's how people would, even to this day, politically, folks punish people for the stands that they take.
Yeah, and I mean it's far-reaching repercussions, but you had people at that time who were concerned just beyond themselves, thinking about their futures and the future of the children, the generations coming behind them. Because unfortunately, again, we heard that she was given a hysterectomy without her consent. Intentionally, they did that, but nonetheless, she's very much concerned about the generations coming behind her. So it takes a bit of selflessness in this fight right here. Like, we can't just be about all about self during these times. I would love for our influencers, at least for their children, to feel some differences by the time. But it's a fight that we continue to fight. Like, what you can't do is just sit back and be on the sideline. In some kind of way, you got to figure out what you're doing in this fight for liberation. It's so many fronts. So you find your strength.
That's right.
And you get involved.
That's right.
Let's see. Bridget says, that's good. The axe often forgets, but the tree remembers. Yeah, I'm gonna be using that one. And Fannie Lou was
I think it was not a joke.
Fannie Lou is no joke. When you watch videos of her, you think she is still here. Her voice resonates so strongly. It definitely does. No holds barred. No, she was very real and a representation of the people. She was raw with it, and she was the people. And so yeah, definitely a powerful voice. We don't have a lot of time left. This commentary behind your great selection has been extremely important. Let me see here. I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. I'm gonna read this book by a friend of Clever Communities in Action by Dr. Kenneth Vaughn. He's actually been up here before, and he's an author and an educator. And I do a show on Thursdays, every other Thursday, with Conveying Culture, and he's one of the guests that I have on there every week. And so he's written a lot of children's books that have been favorites of our youth. And I have not read this one yet, but it's called When Daddy Comes Home. And as we're talking about this particular, all the war on all fronts that we're fighting, there's mass incarceration. And, there were a lot of Black men, a lot of Black people who were incarcerated unjustly, like, excessive penalties for crimes that were not violent crimes. So this right here is an issue that a lot of our children have to deal with when Daddy comes home. And I actually had a situation where I was at Ingleside, and I was there for their career day. And Dr. Vaughn's books were a big hit, and there were some tears shed by some children there because they started talking to me about different things. And one was one of our beautiful baby girls who was down about her complexion, her beautiful, beautiful skin. And he has a book called Kissed by the Sun. And we had a whole session together, she and I was telling her about him and how he wrote it. And, he wrote it for her. And we just had a great time affirming her beauty, our beauty, and gave her the book. And, so his books are always to the rescue. And then this one was here, and there was a baby girl who came and talked about how she wanted this book because her father is incarcerated and would be coming out. So this speaks to a reality that a lot of our children have to deal with. I don't know that it's brought up as much as it should be, but I'm going to go ahead and read this one for you.
All right.
So again, this is When Daddy Comes Home by Dr. Kenneth Vaughn. And let's see, do I want to? Dedications. This book is dedicated to men and women who are currently incarcerated or who are dealing with the effects of being incarcerated. This book is also dedicated to their children and families who are trying to support them. We believe that despite their challenges, they still have a bright future ahead of them if they stay focused, surround themselves with positive people, and use their gifts and talents to open up doors. We believe in you. This book is also dedicated to Ro, Michaela, Mason, Malia, my mom, and my sisters. I super love you all. Thank you for your continued support. All right. Russell loved the freedom of being home from prison. Now he could finally start putting his life back together. Russell was both excited and nervous about his future. Throughout the week and on the weekend, he spent as much time as he could with his children. Jason and Shanika loved having their father home. Jason was especially glad that his father was home because now his father could attend all of his games and practices. Everyone seemed happy, but there was an issue. Since their father came home, he had not found a job. Most of the money Russell used to spend time with his children came from family and friends. No one wanted anything to come between his freedom and being a good father to his children. Daily, Russell went out to fill out job applications to find work. He often felt bad about having to tell about his incarceration when interviewing for various jobs. No one knew, but he began to feel hopeless and helpless because he had not found a job. And we see the guy here saying, "We'll be in touch." Walking home from submitting applications for various jobs, Russell ran into some of his old friends. As they began to catch up, Russell explained his situation and his frustration with not being able to make money to help take care of his family. Some of his friends jokingly told him to apply to McDonald's or Burger King. While they all laughed at the thought, Russell began to think he would have to work at one of the fast food restaurants to start making money. They also suggested selling bootleg CDs and DVDs. He laughed, but knew if he were caught, he would be sent back to prison. A rock and a hard place. After a few weeks of not finding a job, Russell reluctantly agreed to work at a local fast food restaurant. He often felt embarrassed when people he knew came in and saw him working there. Despite his embarrassment, Russell was happy to have a job and a little money to help take care of his kids. Periodically, Shanika and Jason would stop by to say hello to their father. While Russell loved seeing his kids, he also felt embarrassed that they had to see him working there. Jason sensed his father's embarrassment and hugged his father and whispered, "I love you, Dad, and I am proud of you." A few months later, Russell bumped into a friend he met while in prison. As they caught up, his friend Sean shared that he had gone through a similar struggle finding a good job. Sean explained that he found a great opportunity by working for an older man, Curtis Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn did not mind that he had a past. His friend agreed to introduce Russell to Mr. Vaughn. A few days later, Russell went with his friend to meet with Mr. Vaughn at a location where they were remodeling a house. After a brief discussion, Mr. Vaughn agreed to let Russell work for him. Moments later, Russell rolled up his sleeve and began to help paint the rooms of the house. Russell enjoyed working with Mr. Vaughn. He loved being able to work with his hands as they remodeled homes. As time passed, Russell grew close to Mr. Vaughn. They would talk about family, owning a business, and the importance of giving back to the community. Mr. Vaughn was the father figure that he never had growing up. After a few years, Mr. Vaughn told Russell it was time to start his own remodeling business. Russell was reluctant because no one in his family had owned a business. Mr. Vaughn told him not to worry and that he would help. Mr. Vaughn gave Russell a work truck and some of the tools to start his business. Russell's friend Brian agreed to work with him for a while until he was able to make enough money to pay people to work for him. During their weekly Saturday talks, Mr. Vaughn reminded Russell of the importance of giving back to his community and to hire his most important employee, his son Jason. Currently, Jason and his father run a successful remodeling business that employs men from the community and men that are transitioning after experiences with incarceration. While prison had been a challenge, that experience led him to becoming a leader in the community. To be continued.
Hit home. That hits you, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does, because we've all encountered people who have a similar story, and we've encountered children who are dealing with that. And a lot of times we may not even know about the children, but it's something that definitely resonates. And I know I've known of people like Russell, and I've known of people like Mr. Vaughn. Shout out to Brother Mike, Trinity's father, who is somebody who has had his own business for a long time and who is known to hire brothers from the community who may not be able to be hired in the main sector or whatever, and mentors them as well. And I'm sure we all know people like that. And it speaks to, as you were saying, economic, like the wealth gap and the different things that our community has, because a lot of times, the more people you have in that position, the more people who are able to help in that way, and the things that we have dealt with as a community when it comes to economics. And man, I'm just going through here, and I'm just thinking about some of the children that I've worked with, and just all the things that they carry, and that they don't always get the voice, the time to speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a great read.
Yeah, it was. And you as you ended with story to continue, that's if there is a continuation, I want to hear that story too. So
right, definitely. Yeah. So I'll have to ask Dr. Vaughn about that.
Yeah, maybe you can get him to come up here. And I know you said he appears on one of your other productions. Maybe you can get him to come back here and share. It's been a little while since we've had a one of our male authors to come up here and share. So,
do you remember when he came?
I think so.
And his little girl who was
yes.
And I have seen his baby girl, on his videos, his Instagram videos, but she wasn't really talking. I've just seen videos or his pictures that I've seen of her. I had no idea that she had so much fire that she was running the show. I mean, she's like this big, but she was running the show. I said, okay, baby girl, it was the most precious thing. So definitely got to talk about him coming back up here. They started school already down there in Atlanta, and I know that right now they are in that just started school mode,
right?
Virtual situation going on here, but we'll definitely have to have him back. So I don't know. I feel.
Look, we're gonna be upbeat.
Yeah,
we are. We have one Thursday left in August next week, and I think that's right. No, this is the last Thursday. That's right, man. Yes, let me change that.
It's Labor Day weekend. We are in
September. Yeah, you're right.
Or Monday, I think.
Yeah, Tuesday. Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yep. So we'll be into September, and then pretty soon, at least for most in this area, school will be back in, and we'll be back in, later in the month. So we're inviting the village back. We're inviting our readers to get ready to sign up again. Our families to take some time during this virtual learning period to sign on and get some supports. And there's some other things that we're working on to continue to be as supportive and even more supportive to family and the principles and goals of uplifting, culturally affirming literature as we move into the new school year. I think the other day I was talking to you and I made the comment that I think we've been at this 25 weeks. And I don't know if that's the exact number, but if it's close to a half a year.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yes. So
amazing.
Yeah.
It's been quite the year, but there have been some beautiful things that have transpired as a result of it. And again, the way community has come together to support one another has been amazing. And again, to just reiterate what you said, we definitely will want people, time for y'all to come back up here and read with the family. And we'll I won't announce all of that yet, but we'll have some changes coming as well. We're having our,
Yep. We're back in R&D and brainstorming and planning stages. So we got some things coming forward.
Yes. So I'm excited about all of that, and just proud of everybody for the effort that's being put forth towards our children. As I continue to say, these are unprecedented times. And I know you're always talking to educators, Rodney, to teachers and everyone. And I am as well. And we've talked to, some dedicated teachers who are nervous and excited. And I think the fact that they're nervous, because I was talking to someone just about the fact that I've been speaking to educators, someone in a different state, and they're like, well, why are they nervous? And I'm like, because they're dedicated and it's something new, and there's so much, they're concerned about it being that it will resonate, that it will be effective, and that they will be effective. And you're talking about people who have been doing the work for a long time and have been effective, but they are just really concerned. And I was like, that says a lot about them to me, because if they weren't nervous, it would just be to me kind of like, I mean, whatever, I'm just gonna do it.
It's called, they're conscientious, and we're thankful for it. And if you've never tried to teach in a virtual environment, you may not appreciate what's involved with it. Is not just doing what you do in person and just putting it on air. It is not the same thing.
It's not. It's
At least
not.
it shouldn't be, I should say. Yeah.
I mean, shout out to the parents, all the parents who are filling in the gaps, the ones who were being the teachers during the spring, and some who have opted to continue to be the teachers during the fall. And just regardless, the parental involvement has to be at a completely different level at this time. So the parents stepping up and rising to the occasion, and all of the challenges with that, from creating spaces in your home for that, and possibly working yourself while your children are doing their schoolwork, and having multiple children, and just all these different things going on at a time. So again, it's definitely about this village. It's definitely about this unity. So we'll keep that thing going. And you guys, we are, always, it's great coming back here on this Thursday with you guys. And yeah, like you said, this is the last one.
Yes. Yep.
For August. Wow.
Yep. You'll be singing Earth, Wind, and Fire in September next time.
Hey, yes. So I love it. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure that you give us a like, a share, so that other people can know about it. And if you have not liked the Clever Communities in Action Facebook page, make sure that you do that and send it to your other friends to like it as well. And be sure to follow Clever Communities in Action on YouTube as well. Because if you don't know, we're broadcasting on YouTube as well. Some of y'all I know end up getting put in Facebook jail. So if you ever get put in Facebook jail, there are other options to tune into our programming as well, okay? So thanks for tuning in, you guys, and y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again next Thursday. All right.
Good night.
Look, mommy, community in action. What on my little sound of that? Look, daddy, there's a book for me too. But on my little sound of that. Creative, affirming, and culture for me too. Look, granny, a little sound of that. Look, granny, a little sound of that. Look, granny, a little sound of that. Learning and exploring about history, you see. Look, mommy, a little sound of that. We confident, we practicing the those and fluency. Look, daddy, a little sound of that. Families, they bonding, they representing me. Look, granny, a little sound of that. Look, I'm here, a little sound of that. Nice, I see a little sound of that.
So reliable, culturally relevant. Sit back and listen to the wisdom while we represent. So reliable, culturally relevant. Readers to leaders, they hold it down where they have to sit. Who reliable, culturally relevant. Sit back and listen to the wisdom while you represent. So reliable, culturally relevant. Readers to leaders, they hold it down, yeah, they have to sit.
Look, mommy, community in action. Well, on my little sound of that. Look, daddy, there's a book for me too.